Welcome to Movie Speeching. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take good care. The Titan is the name of the movie. Please like and subscribe to get every update. In the year 2048, our planet is overpopulated and has lost access to most natural resources. The government launches a program that will genetically engineer 14 soldiers to travel to Titan, Saturn's moon, to found a new civilization. These 14 volunteers and their families were relocated to their neighborhoods and given luxurious, technologically advanced homes. Former pilot Rick is one of these volunteers, and he brings along his wife Abigail, a doctor, and their child Lucas. Program director Dr. Collingwood has high hopes for Rick's development because while in the Air Force, he was shot down and had to cross the Syrian desert, injured and alone without food or drinking water for 3 days. That proves you are a bad guy. Survivor. Rick and Abigail do this for their son because they want him to have a future, but Abigail admits to Collingwood that she is a little worried that Rick will become seriously ill. Collingwood confirmed that this could happen, but that she need not worry because all Rick needs is proper care. Once all the volunteers have moved, they have their first appointment with Collingwood to begin treatment. First, he gives an overview of the show, explaining how we destroyed the planet and that Titan is the next place to go because it's the only other place in our solar system that has planets, primitive atmosphere and ecosystem. However, there is also liquid methane that falls into large oceans and lakes that they cannot swim in, and a nitrogen-rich atmosphere that they cannot breathe, making it simply too cold to live there. So, instead of terraforming, they decided to genetically modify humans to adapt to Titan's natural characteristics. One of the volunteers did not understand how the body did not reject the treatment, and although Collingwood explained that the clinical trials had been successful, he also admitted that there was no guarantee that everyone will survive. The volunteer continued to ask questions about the program, but Rick remained silent and told him to leave if he didn't like it. Volunteers come from all over the world and were chosen because they all survived extreme circumstances. Once the meeting ends, they will be given a key card to have full access to the base and taken to the lab to fire the first 300 shots they will receive over the next few weeks. Dr. Freya tries to explain the purpose of each scene, but Rick only understands half of it. Rick's family is now starting a new routine, but nothing out of the ordinary. Lucas goes to school, Abigail looks after the house, and when allowed, she sits with Rick during various treatments. All the volunteers quickly became friends and began dating off base, being neighbors, allowing them to dine and grill all the time. Sometimes the conversations at these parties get a little dark, like when one of the volunteers admits to being afraid that after the 2 years on Titan they agreed to, they won't be allowed back. One day, their barbecue included extra drinks because it was the last time the volunteers were allowed to drink alcohol. In the evening, Abigail felt dizzy from drinking too much wine, so Rick helped her upstairs. However, he was the one who fell down in the end when he started coughing a lot and felt like he couldn't breathe. Abigail examined him and noticed he was feverish and immediately pulled him into the bedroom, where she gave him some medicine and put him to bed, staying with him all night. Sometime later, Collingwood was pleased with the performance of the volunteers' DNA samples, meaning it was time for a thorough test. The group is required to spend a long time underwater without an oxygen tank, and after half an hour, only Rick and Tally are left, making it a competition. By the end, Tally had been swimming for 39 minutes, but Rick still managed to stay there. In fact, he felt so comfortable that he started swimming in the pool. This shocked everyone because Rick didn't swim like a normal person. He walked at high speed and moved like a dolphin. In the evening, Rick showed his son this new move in the garden pool. He then carried Lucas in, and the child surprised him by mentioning his deceased grandfather, whom he was sure would have loved all of this. Later, he and his wife went to the pool to have fun in the water, but Abigail paused when she noticed black veins on Rick's body. Rick wondered what was going on, but just like that, the darkness disappeared and Abigail decided to ignore it for now. A few days later, the volunteers underwent their first surgery. One of the wives, Rayanne, visits Abigail so their children can play together, and she shares some of her concerns. She admits that she is extremely scared and that she doesn't think her husband has any place here, so Abigail comforts her by reminding her that the volunteers will save humanity and, more importantly, their children. Rick emerged from surgery in excellent health and returned home to continue spending time with his family. Abigail is happy to see him progressing well, but she's also worried about the potential side effects she talked about in the instruction booklet they gave them. That night, Abigail woke up to find the bed empty. Rick is in the kitchen, putting ice on his body because he's so hot. Abigail hands him a larger bucket of cold water, and Rick challenges her to a little game. They both put their hands in the bucket, and while Abigail had to take her hands out after a few minutes because she couldn't stand the cold, Rick kept them still. They were there, confirming that he no longer felt cold. The next morning, they went jogging together and stopped to admire a special roadside spot with the best view in the area. Rick laments not being able to save the planet. Various experiments continued, including running with a mask simulating Titan's atmosphere and swimming for long periods in freezing water. Sometimes a volunteer can't take it anymore and has to leave for the day, but in Tally's case, she was stubborn and wanted to stay in the water even though she could barely stand the cold. To help him, Rick teaches him underwater meditation. One afternoon after the test, the volunteers were showering and Rick noticed his hair was falling out. Tally confirmed that this happened to her as well. Suddenly, they heard screaming and discovered that one of the women was having a seizure, vomiting blood. Doctors rushed to help her, but nothing they could do could save her, and the volunteers encountered the first dead person in the group. Later that day, the volunteers met to discuss what had happened. Some of them are also afraid of death, but others remind them that they are always aware of the risks. Even though they shouldn't drink alcohol, they still decide to drink to help themselves cope. While Rayanne comforts husband Zane outside, Tally's husband Andrew helps Abigail in the kitchen. He talks about how they met and how he fought to be together until the end. Then Tally joins them to point out that Andrew is now desperate to start a family. As Andrew leaves to put the dishes on the table, Tally admits that Andrew thought she would have to be away from home for 2 years to shake this off and be a good wife, but she wants more. A little later, during dinner, Abigail noticed that all the volunteers' veins sometimes turned black. Suddenly, they heard a scream coming from the garden. Zane fell and attacked Rayanne. The rest immediately rush out and hold Zane until he calms down while Abigail takes Rayanne away. The next day, Freya goes to the neighborhood to give the volunteers more medicine to keep them from having the same problems as the dead woman and Zane. Abigail noticed that some of these doses were quite high and asked to speak to Collingwood, but he was unavailable. That evening, Rick found himself vomiting blood. Abigail tells him to rest while she cleans up, and when Rick is no longer looking, she takes a blood sample from him. Then, as she moved around the house to lock all the doors, she finally noticed that there were hidden cameras in the house that the people on the show could watch 24/7. The next time Rick used the pool, he started to notice his skin peeling, but he didn't seem too concerned. When they go to bed, Abigail notices the condition of Rick's skin and that he is losing his hair, which makes her even more worried. The next day, Abigail looks at Rick's blood under a microscope and discovers it is turning black. Sometime later, the volunteers performed the next major procedure, which involved making their eyes cat-like so they could see in the dark. The surgery went well, but Rick had to be blindfolded for a while and his family had to help him at home. One night, Abigail heard Rick groan in pain as his eyes began to bleed. They take him to the lab for another surgery, and Abigail goes to Collingwood to ask what's going on, pointing out that there's something alive inside Rick and that she knows about the cameras. Collingwood explained that he didn't want cameras, but that was a Pentagon order for security reasons, and since Collingwood's blindness was part of the process, he would be fine in a few days. Abigail assumed he wouldn't tell her otherwise, but Collingwood took her home. Abigail arrived at her house and started preparing Rick's clothes when suddenly she heard a siren. When she goes outside, she sees the army surrounding Zane's house. She wasn't allowed to get close, but she still saw the horrifying scene that happened next. The mutated Zane threw Rayanne out the window, killing her instantly. Soldiers burst into the house and shot Zane, killing him. Later at the base, Abigail watches over Rick and hears more soldiers arriving. Since Collingwood will be busy dealing with this mess, Abigail takes the opportunity to take Rick's card key and go snooping around. After hiding in strategic locations to avoid security, she entered Collingwood's office and found all the records showing that volunteers were infusing DNA with animal DNA to reach the advanced stage. Next evolution, which Collingwood calls Homo Giant. Meanwhile, Collingwood has a meeting with Colonel Solano and the people at NASA, who want to stop the program and call it unproven science. The volunteers get violent and it goes into the realm of crime instead of about space. The last people to try the same thing were the Nazis. Colonel Solano wants this experiment removed from his base, but Collingwood and his advisors point out that defense ministers have the final say, so they won't leave unless they say so. After the meeting, Freya also tried to tell Collingwood that they should stop, but he fired her. When Rick is brought home, Collingwood arrives to explain that he will regain his sight in 24 hours. They miscalculated the brain's enhanced sensory processing capabilities and Zane's mind was simply overloaded, but further surgery could fix everything. Abigail eventually breaks down and demands to know the truth, so Collingwood finally admits that they are injecting animal DNA into volunteers. He can't guarantee it will work, so he understands Abigail's concerns, but he also points out that they always knew there would be risks. Rick must follow this new routine to survive. Abigail hated hearing this and kept her distance for a while. A day later, Rick removed the bandage and confirmed that his vision was fine, and he also shaved his head to avoid going bald. As night fell, he discovered he could see every detail in the darkness and was so impressed that he phoned Collingwood to confirm that he would proceed with the procedure. While the family stayed home, all the volunteers had surgery, but there were many complications and most died. In the end, only Rick and Tally were left alive and well. The next day, Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas visit Rick and Tally. They are shocked to discover that they have become some kind of mutant creatures that only only communicate through tactile contact and low frequencies that humans cannot hear. Rick placed his hand on the glass between them, making Abigail cry, and her tears deepened when Collingwood gave her Rick's wedding ring. In a few days, Tally and Rick will go to Titan, but in the meantime, they are allowed to stay home. Rick has trouble wearing human clothes, and when Abigail tries to help him, Rick accidentally hits her. He tried to watch over her, but now Abigail was so afraid of him that she couldn't help but stay away from his touch. Rick spends most of his time at the pool, feeling more comfortable there than at home. One night, after putting Lucas to bed, Abigail looked outside and saw Tally walking into the garden with blood on her hands. Rick doesn't seem to mind this and approaches Tally so they can communicate through strange tentacles growing from their fingers. At this time, the army arrived in the neighborhood and found Andrew dead in the bathroom. They also begin to approach Abigail's house, causing her to run upstairs to hide with Lucas. The soldiers shot Tally with tranquilizer darts, and it took several hits to knock her out. However, as they get closer, Tally reveals that she is awake and uses her tentacles to kill one of them. The others immediately responded by shooting and killing her. The soldiers then try to attack Rick, but he easily takes them out with his new powers. Rick plans to drown the last soldier in the pool, but Abigail hears the noise and rushes out to stop him. Unfortunately, it was too late, and realizing what he had done, Rick ran away. Colonel Solano calls on his entire team to begin searching for Rick, ignoring Collingwood when he asks him not to kill him because his search is expensive. Abigail and Lucas are taken to the base for safety, but Abigail leaves when she realizes where Rick has gone. After making sure she wasn't being followed, Abigail ran to their special place and found Rick there. Abigail holds out her hand to show she is no longer afraid, and when Rick's tentacles grab her wrist, she kisses him. That's when army helicopters found them and took them down. Abigail then awakens at the base with Collingwood by her side, explaining that they must hurt her for her own good. The Pentagon will soon shut down the program, which means they have to send Rick to Titan immediately, because Tally has proven that Earth's atmosphere will drive them crazy or just kill the bodies this new. However, they couldn't force him to do it because it could kill him, so Abigail had to convince Rick to go. She is then taken to Rick, who is locked in a glass cage. Collingwood wants Abigail to give Rick a shot of quetiapine, which acts like a chemical lobotomy and will erase all of his memories. Abigail doesn't like it, but Collingwood explains that it's the only way to get him to leave. A soldier injects her with quetiapine in a drawer, which Abigail drops only to make him pick it up. Abigail then entered the cage, and after exchanging a meaningful look with Rick, she gave him an injection that rendered him unconscious. As Abigail heads out, she asks Freya to accompany her while a soldier approaches Rick to prepare for the trip. However, Rick just pretended to be unconscious and killed the man, which is when Collingwood realized that Abigail had taken some saline solution from the drawer while the soldier wasn't looking, and that's what she gave Rick. The soldiers opened fire, but Rick ran away and hid in dark rooms where he had a visual advantage. Abigail goes to find Lucas and Freya and guides them to another exit, where they find Rick seriously injured. Lucas and Abigail hug him to prove once again that they are not afraid, and Freya goes to look for medicine when suddenly all the soldiers appear. Collingwood tells the women to run or the soldiers will shoot everyone, but Abigail refuses. Angered, Collingwood demanded that the soldiers open fire, but Solano stood up to him and told him that he would not shoot two unarmed women and an innocent child. He then pointed his gun at Collingwood, and all the other soldiers followed his example. When Collingwood is captured, Abigail runs to Rick and her hug helps him solidify his most precious memories. Sometime later, Abigail and Freya became researchers for the Titan II project, using more ethical methods to save the world. Meanwhile, Rick is sent to Titan, where he reveals that his new body has wings and can fly around his new home. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.